Okay. So today, guys, we're going to be covering combining like terms. Really, all that is you're going to take the terms that look alike, that look similar, and you're going to put them together, add them up. Okay, so on this first problem right here, I see 3x plus 6x. So we notice that we have x's here and we have x's here. Okay, since they both have an x, they are like terms, so we are going to combine them. So if I have 3x's and I add 6x's, I know together I have a total of 9x's.
Teachers, pardon the interruption. Can you please
Well,
read
wait for the
figures
announcements.
M through C to the PAC Center?
Sorry. Okay, so now let's look at problem number 2. Okay, so in problem number 2, I see some numbers that have a p behind it and some numbers that do not. Okay, so I know anything that has a p will be similar, so here and here. And pay attention to in front of that minus sign, so we're going to treat that as a negative. So I have a positive 7p, and then I also have a negative 9p. Okay, I also have numbers that do not have the variable behind them, so negative 1 and a positive 5. So those are what we're going to combine together. So let's do our p's first. We have 7p's and a negative 9p. So combine means to add. So if I take 7 and I add negative 9, that's going to give me a negative 2. So I have negative 2p. So one more time, that was 7p and a negative 9p. 7 plus negative 9 is negative 2. Okay, next we have to do the numbers that do not have the variable. So negative 1 and a positive 5. So if I combine those, add those, negative 1 plus 5 is a positive 4. Done. Okay, on problem number 3, I see some variables, and then I see some numbers that do not have a variable. So the first thing I see is w's. Notice the sign in front of it is a minus sign, so I'm going to treat that as a negative 6w. Okay, we also see numbers that do not have a variable, so those are alike. Now we're going to combine them. Okay, so since that negative 6w and I don't have any other w's, I'm going to go ahead and drop that down. That's all I have is negative 6w's. Okay, I have a positive 9 and a positive 5, so I combine those. 9 plus 5 is a positive 14. Good. Okay, in the next problem, I see A's, numbers with A's behind it, and then I see numbers that have B's behind it. Okay, so first let's look at our A's. I see 26 A's here, and there's a minus sign in front of that minus 4A, so I'm going to treat that as a negative 4A. Okay, so let's look at our B's. A positive 2B and a positive 10B. These are the numbers that we need to combine. So let's do A's first because we go in alphabetical order to be proper. So I have a 26A and a negative 4A. So I'm going to add those numbers together. 26 plus negative 4 is going to give me a positive 22. And that's how many A's I have. Okay, now we're going to do the B's. I had a positive 2B and a positive 10B. We add those numbers up. 2 plus 10 is 12. That's a positive 12, and that's how many B's I have. All right, next problem, I see X's. Numbers with X's behind it. I see numbers with Y's behind it. And that's it. So let's highlight the ones that are like terms, or similar ones. So I have 5x. I have a minus, and I'm going to put a 1 in front of that, minus, let's see if I can get that in there, minus 1x. And then I have a positive 3x. Okay, now let's look at our y's. I see a positive 7y, and I see a positive 2y. So let's combine our x's first because we go in alphabetical order. I have a 5 a -1, and a 3. So I'm going to add those three numbers up. 5 plus -1 plus 3 will give me a +7. And those are my x's, so don't forget your x. So altogether I have 7 x's. And now we're going to combine our y's. I have a +7y and a +2y. So I'm going to add 7 and 2. It's going to give me a +9. And those are my y's, so don't forget our y. Okay, in the next problem I see k-squareds, I see k's, and then I see numbers by itself. Okay, k-squared and k are not the same thing. You can only add them together if they look exactly alike. So let's look at for k-squareds first. I have 8 k-squareds, and then I have minus 2k squared. I also have k's. I have a -1k, so I'm going to put a 1 in front, remember? And then I also have a -5k. And then I have this lone number all by itself. So we have 3 different terms here. We have k-squareds, we have k's, and then we have the plain Jane numbers. Okay, so let's add our like terms. Let's look at k-squareds first. So I have 8 k-squareds. I also had a -2k squared. So I'm going to add 8 and -2. That's going to give me a +6. And those were our k's squared, so don't forget that. Okay, now let's do our k's. I had a -1k and a -5k, so I'm going to add those numbers up. -1 plus -5 is -6, so I'm going to put -6, and those were our k's. Okay, last but not least, we had the number that was all by itself, right? +7, and there is no other number to add to it, so that +7 just drops down. Okay. On this next problem, notice it says a squared b. I have a lot of students that get confused on that. A squared b is just one single term, right? Okay, so anything else that says exactly a squared b the same will be a like term. I'm going to erase this, so don't write this down real quick, but I do want to show you. If one said a squared b and one said just ab, those are not like terms because they are not exactly the same. They have to be exactly the same. Okay, so here I have -4 a squared b, and here I have a +10 a squared b. Notice they both say a squared b exactly, so those are like terms. I also have the plain Jane number all by itself. Okay, so now we're going to take our like terms and combine them. So we had -4 a squared b's, and we have a +10 a squared b. So we're going to add those numbers together. -4 plus 10 is a +6, and that's how many a squared b's we have, so let's write that down. Next we have our regular number, our +7. There is no other like term with it to combine it with, so it drops down. It's a 7. Okay, on problem 8, let's see what all we can tell here. Let's see, we have x squareds. We have x's. Remember, x squared and x are not exactly the same, so they're not like terms. And then we have our regular numbers. So we have x squareds. I see -3 x squareds here. Now let's highlight our x's. We have a +2x here. We have a +8x here. And we also have our plain Jane numbers, a -7 and a -6. Okay, so now that we know what we need, what our like terms are, let's combine them. So let's do our x squareds first. So we had 4x squareds, but we also had a -3x squared. So we're going to add those numbers up. 4 plus -3 is a +1. So I have 1x squared. Okay, it is not necessary to keep a 1 in front of a variable. So if you want to write 1x squared, I'm not going to be mad at you. But 1x squared is the same thing as just putting, x squared. So x squared is exactly the same as 1x squared. So if you feel more comfortable leaving that 1 out front, do so. If not, remember 1x squared is exactly the same as just x squared. Okay, now let's add up our x's. So we had a positive 2x and we had a positive 8x. So we're going to add those numbers up. 2 plus 8 is 10. So a positive 10, and those were my x's. Finally, we're going to do the regular numbers. I see a negative 7 and a negative 6, so we add those numbers together. Negative 7 plus negative 6 is going to give us a negative 13, so we need to put a minus 13. One moment, guys, hold up.
Yeah, it says that it's gonna be your class.
What do you mean, the interventions? Or,
Yeah, look, check it out.
you'll have my class, but that's 4th period. It'll be after lunch. So you go to 3rd period, go to lunch, and then come back to me.
Third period.
Yeah, we're in 3rd period right now.
Third period right now.
Yes.
So right now, what are we supposed to?
You're supposed to be going to 3rd period. So you need to be in Spanish. You need to go to A103.
Spanish. Oh my,
It's okay.
I'm new here.
It's okay.
I'm a sophomore, but I'm new to the school.
That's okay. Your teacher will understand. Just
Yeah.
tell her you got confused and accidentally went to 4th.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. All right, guys. Sorry, I had someone come to my room. All right, so let's continue. My fault. Okay, on number 9, let's keep going. We're going to determine what our like terms are and identify those and then add them up. So I see a squareds, I see ab's, and that's it. So a squared here. If you want to, you could put a 1 out front of it. And I also have, oh, I don't have any other a squareds, my fault. Okay, we also see ab's, so let's identify all of those. A positive 7ab and a negative 10ab. And I do have a third term, and it's a b squared. If you want to stick a 1 out front, go ahead and do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is identify how many a squareds we have. Well, all I see is that 1 a squared. There are no other a squareds to combine with it, so we're going to drop it down. We have 1 a squared. So if that 1 makes you feel more comfortable, it's okay to leave it, but remember that 1 a squared is exactly the same as, it's not letting me, 1 a squared is the same thing as just a squared. Okay, next let's look at our ABs. Well, I see we have 7AB, a positive 7AB, and then we also have a negative 10AB. So what we're going to do is we're going to add those two terms together, those two numbers. So 7 plus a negative 10 gives me a negative 3. So I'm going to put minus 3, and that was my ABs. Okay, finally we're going to look at our B squareds. That's the only B squared we have. We only have that 1 B squared, so it's going to drop down as a positive 1b squared. Remember that 1 in front of it if you feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable leaving it there and you like it better that way, that's cool, but remember it's the same thing as just b squared. All right, on 10, I see x squareds, I see xy's, and I see y squareds, very similar to the problem we just did. So I see 1 x squared there. I don't see any other x squareds, so I'm done with my x squareds. So now let's identify my xy's. I see a positive 2xy here, and I see a minus 7xy here. No other xy, so we're done with those. Now y squareds. I see a positive 4y squared, no other y squareds. Okay, so now that we identified what our like terms are, let's add them up. So x squareds first. Notice we only have that 1x squared, so I'm going to go ahead and drop it down. Remember, 1x squared is just the same as x squared. Okay, now let's do our xy's. We had a positive 2xy and a negative 7xy. So I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to add negative 7. That's going to give me negative 5. So I'm going to put minus 5. And those are my xy's. All right, and finally we're going to look at our y squareds. Remember, we only had a positive 4y squareds. There were no other ones, so it drops down as plus 4y squared. All right, moving on. Okay, perimeter. We have to understand what the word perimeter means in order to complete this problem. Well, we remember that perimeter means to add up all the sides. So I need to take each side of this triangle, which there's 3 of them, and add them up. Doesn't matter which side that you start with. I'm going to start with this side here, so 4AB, so I'm going to write that down. Plus, now I'm going to move on to the next side and add it, so I'm going to move on to 5A minus 1. Plus, and now I'm going to add the third side, which is 17 minus A. So perimeter means add all the sides, so that's what I just did. I took 3 sides and I put a plus sign between them. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing that we had been doing. We're going to identify our like terms and add them up. So I see ABs, I see A's, and I see regular numbers. So let's look at A's first. I have a positive 5A here, and I have a minus 1A there. I'm going to go ahead and stick a 1 out front of that. Next I see ABs, and I have 4AB here, and there are no other ABs. Okay, now regular numbers. I see a negative 1 and a positive 17. Okay, so now that we identified what our like terms are, we're going to add them together. So we're going to do our A's first. We have a positive 5A and a negative 1A. We add that up. 5 plus negative 1 gives me a positive 4, and that's how many A's we had. Now we're going to move on to ABs. We had 4AB. There were no other ABs, so that's going to drop down. As it's a positive, so I need to put a plus, 4AB. Now we do the regular numbers. We had a negative 1 and a positive 17, so we add. Negative 1 plus 17 is a positive 16. And we are done. This next problem is similar because it's perimeter, which means we add up all the sides. Well, it's a rectangle this time, so it has 4 sides. And you should know that the opposite sides on a rectangle are exactly the same. So if that top side is 3y minus 5, I know this bottom side has to be 3y minus 5. If that right side is y plus 2, I know this left side has to be, y plus 2. Okay, so now what I need to do is take these 4 sides, it doesn't matter where you start, and add them up. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top. That's 3y minus 5 plus, now I'm going to take the right side, which is y plus 2, plus, now I'm going to take the bottom side, which is 3y minus 5. I need to shrink this down. Give me a second. And now all I have left is that left-hand side. So plus y plus 2. Okay, let me shrink that down so it matches. All right. Okay, so I have my 4 sides with a plus sign between them all. We're adding them all up. So now my job is to identify the like terms. Okay, so I see y's, and then I see regular numbers. That's it. So let's do y's first. I have 3y here. I have a positive 1y here. So I had 3 y's here, a positive 1y here, 3 y's here, and then a positive 1y here. Now let's look at our regular numbers. We had a negative 5, a positive 2, a negative 5, and a positive 2. So now let's add our terms. look at y's first. So I have a 3, 1, and I'm going to go ahead and add my 1, a 3, and a 1. So 3 plus 1 plus 3 plus 1 is equal to 8. So I have 8 total y's. Now I'm going to look at the regular numbers, which was a -5, a +2, a -5, and a +2. So we add that up. -5 plus 2 plus -5 plus 2 is going to give us a -6. So now that we've added all of our sides up and we combined our like terms, this is the final answer. All right, a similar problem because it's perimeter still. So this figure has 4 sides, so we're going to have to take all 4 of these sides and add them together. I'm going to start with the top side. So that's k squared minus 9k plus 23 plus, now I'm going to add the right side, k squared plus k plus, now I'm going to add the bottom side, which is 2k squared minus 17. I'm going to have to shrink that down. I'm running out of room. Plus, now I have to add that last side, the left side, which is k squared plus k. Shrink it to match. Okay, so now that I have all of those added up, I'm going to take what look alike and combine them. So let's identify. I see k squareds, I see k's, and I see regular numbers. Okay, since it's so small, I'm going to underline them in different colors. Okay, so let's look at k squareds here. I have one single k squared. I have another single k squared. Then I see that we have 2 k squareds and then another single k squared. Okay, then we have k's. I see we have a -9k. I also see we have a single k right here, so that's 1. And then we have another 1k here. Okay, now we also have regular numbers. So let's identify those. I see a +23 and a -17. All right, so now that we've identified our like terms, let's go ahead and add them up. Let's do k squareds first. So we have 1k squared plus, we had another 1k squared plus 2k squareds plus another 1k squared. So that's going to be a total of 5k squareds. And remember, this is 1k squared, 1k squared, then we had 2k squareds, and then we had another 1k squared. Okay, now let's do our k's. We had a -9k, then we had a 1k, and then we had another 1k. So -9 plus 1 plus 1. So -9 plus 1 plus 1 is a -7k. And all we have left is our regular numbers. We have a 23 and we have a -17. So 23 plus -17 is a +6, so I'm going to put +6. So we did the perimeter by adding up all the sides together, all 4 sides together, and then we simplified by combining our like terms. Okay. On 14, I see some parentheses, but between the parentheses, all we have is a plus sign. Guys, and when you have a plus sign out front of the parentheses, it really doesn't affect anything. So, on this first set of parentheses on 14, notice that there is absolutely nothing out front here. So since there's nothing in front of this set of parentheses, the first set of parentheses is kind of irrelevant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this first part without the parentheses. So I'm going to rewrite it as 3k squared minus 7k plus 2. Okay, this second set of parentheses out front, I have a plus sign. Okay, but guys, when you have a plus sign only in front of a parentheses, it does absolutely nothing. These set of parentheses are just here to confuse you and throw you off. So really, I'm going to get rid of the second set of parentheses too. So that's just going to say plus 5k squared plus 3k minus 7. These parentheses are unnecessary altogether in this case. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify my like terms and then combine them. So I see k squareds, I see k's, and I see regular numbers. So I have 3k squareds here. I see a positive 5k squareds here, and that's it. Now let's look at k's. I have a negative 7k and a positive 3k. And then regular numbers, I see a positive 2 and a negative 7. So let's go ahead and add those up, starting with our k squareds. So we have 3k squareds, we have 5k squared. So 3 plus 5 is 8. So we have 8k squareds. Now let's do our k's. We have negative 7k's here. We have a positive 3k here. So we add that up. Negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. So I'm going to put a minus 4, and those were our k's. Okay, finally we have our regular numbers. I see a positive 2 here and a negative 7 here. So a positive 2 add negative 7, that's going to give you a negative 5. So I'm going to put a minus 5. Okay, so remember, if you have a plus sign out in front of the parentheses, a plus sign does absolutely nothing. It's just throwing you off. Okay, so let's compare 14 with 15 though. 14 and 15 look very similar, right? Okay, but the difference is on 14 we had a plus sign in front of the second set of parentheses. On 15 we have a minus sign, okay? Okay, so let's see how that's going to look. All right, so I look at my first set of parentheses. Notice there's nothing out front here, so there's no need for this first set of parentheses. So I'm going to take this 3a minus 3 plus 4b and just drop it down. Okay. On my second set of parentheses, I have this minus sign out front. Okay, a minus sign does change things because, guys, if you multiply by a negative, what it does is it makes the opposite. So if I ever see a negative in front of a set of parentheses, what I do is I just think of it as the opposite of everything in the parentheses behind it. So I'm going to take everything in this parentheses and I'm going to make it the opposite because we have a negative out here. So the opposite of a positive 9a is a negative 9a. The opposite of a positive 6b is a negative 6b. And the opposite of a negative 8 is a positive 8. So remember, on 14, if there's a plus sign doesn't do anything. But on 15, we had a minus sign in front of the parentheses. And think of that as the opposite of whatever's behind it in parentheses. Okay, so now that we handled that, let's take our like terms and add them up. I see a's, I see b's, and I see regular numbers. So I have 3a's here, negative 9a's here, and that's all of our a's. We have a positive 4b here, we have a negative 6b here. And then finally we have regular numbers, a negative 3 and a positive 8. So let's go ahead and add those up. A's first. So we had 3 a's and negative 9 a's. So 3 plus negative 9 is a negative 6. And that's our a's, so don't forget your a. Next are b's. We had a positive 4 and a negative 6, so I add those up. 4 plus negative 6 is a negative 2, so I'm going to put minus 2, and those were our b's. And then finally our regular numbers. I have a negative 3 and a positive 8. So negative 3 plus 8 is a positive 5. So I put a plus 5. And that's it. All right. Bye, guys.